Hello, hi, welcome. So happy to have you here.
Great to be here, thank you.
Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what do you do for us?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a Carnatic percussionist, drummer, composer, educator. I'm based in Oakland, California, the United States, and I'm here for the music season for performances. And this is actually my 25th year coming to the music season for performances. So very happy to be here and to sort of come back to the source.
Congratulations on your 25th year.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. What sparked your interest in music? Where did you start?
I think there's a lot of reasons. I grew up in a small town in Michigan, which is in the middle of America, a small town called Kalamazoo. Mm-hmm. And my parents, my whole family's into music. My mom is a trained Carnatic singer, wow. And my dad was into music for most of his life. So I kind of grew up listening to a lot of music. My parents had a huge tape record collection, so I kind of grew up listening to that. And they used to take me to concerts, mm-hmm. So I just kind of had a lot of early experiences, exposure to Carnatic music. And of course, I was also listening to everything you would hear on American radio and TV. So I was just exposed to a lot of different things at an early age. But I consider myself very lucky to have that early exposure to Carnatic music, having been born and raised in the United States.
Is there a particular moment or memory you could recall that you decided, this is my calling?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me that. I wish there was a simple answer, but not really. I think it happened very organically over a very long period of time. I started learning when I was 8 from a local teacher in Kalamazoo. His name was Damodaran Srinivasan, and then I learned from him for about 6 months. He moved. I continued lessons with him over the phone or the speakerphone, which was the only option at the time. Then my advanced training has been with the master who lives actually just around the corner from here. His name is Guru Adorai Sir, one of the sort of senior legends in the field. So I started learning from him when I was 10, and I've been sort of under his guidance since then. So, and I started performing, I think, when I was around 9, and locally, regionally, across the country, in India, Canada. So things kind of sort of developed very organically. But again, it's a very sort of unlikely story. Like for a kid born in the United States, growing up in Kalamazoo, Michigan, to now be a professional Indian percussionist and musician is a very unlikely story. But I think everyone kind of has their own journey. And I studied music in college as well, and I went on to do my PhD in music. So I think at that point, after college, I was already performing very actively. I was performing here, performing there. I was into Carnatic music, of course, but also jazz and pop and sort of cross genre things even by college. So at that point, I think the writing was sort of on the wall that there was kind of a path forward here. And
you did your PhD in musicology.
In musicology, yeah, which is kind of like the study of music, music and society. Not just music, but and performance, but how does it fit into a larger social context, and where the people involved, music theory, it kind of blends all of that. Mm-hmm.
How do you think that helps with your performance and with your composition and all that?
Yeah.
Learning about music?
Yeah, totally. I think it's helped a lot because, in Indian music especially, we're very much trained to be performers. We study from a guru, you learn your art form, you perform, maybe you sort of teach at some point, but music is not in a vacuum, right? Music is of, by, and for people, in a specific context. And I think the more you know about that and, the history of it, the theory, where it came from, where it is today, where it might be going, that really informs, your identity, of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and where you want to go with
you can go into the depths of it, and it also helps with the composition, right? When you come up with something. Yeah,
when you're composing, when you're bringing different genres together, and again, it's not just a matter of blending music, but you're bringing different people together as a collaborator, right? So the more you know about the people in the communities, and their values, the more you can sort of organically bring things together.
That's beautiful. Yeah, mm-hmm. To think about it.
To think of it in music in its full context. Mm-hmm.
Could you share a little bit about your key milestones so far?
Key milestones? I guess there's a lot of things I think happen, especially when you're young. They happen sort of really because the stars align, right? It's not like you necessarily know at the age of 8, I'm going to do this and this and this, 20 years from now. So I think just like meeting my gurus, my teachers, very organically. Like I said, in Kalamazoo, Michigan, there happened to be a teacher in town when I was 8 years old. So that was something that you couldn't have orchestrated. It was really kind of meant to be. And then meeting my advanced teacher, Guru sir, that was also very organic. He was on a concert tour. He came to Michigan, and I just met him backstage before the concert. And without really knowing anything about me or anything about my playing, he just said, "Hey, next time you come to India, come over and I'll teach you."
Wow.
And there was some chemistry. He actually, remember for that concert, he invited me to sit with him on stage for the whole concert. We didn't know each other at all. I mean, I knew of him. He definitely didn't know me. And it was like one of these marathon, like 4-hour concerts, and I was like 9 years old. I just sat there. So I think he was he knew that I was pretty serious, pretty dedicated. So all those things just happened very, organically. Yeah, and then I think coming to the season for the first time was also really kind of a turning point, because it's obviously a very different context here. And growing up in the diaspora, in America, it's a very different scene than what you have here. And we're of course right in the heart of Mylapore, where so much of this scene kind of began. So coming here and understanding sort of the context here, playing with artists here, developing relationships, long-term friendships with artists here across generations, I think was really wonderful. And this was a way of sort of reconnecting with family, with tradition, with culture. So it's really like a kind of cross-cultural experience, even for us in the diaspora. So
when was your first time coming to the?
I think '99 was my first.
Wow.
Yeah, first time performing here. And again, as a kid, I knew preparing and performing and seeing my teacher and some family, and that's it, right? So now I look back and I realize what an incredible sort of experience that was. And but it's taken so many years to really develop those relationships across countries, across borders, and of course we live in a very different world now where things are a lot more connected. So everyone's on WhatsApp and social media and stuff, so it's much easier to connect. But actually, even back then, which is not that long ago, you didn't have those things. You had to come in person, you had to meet, you had to spend time, and of course you still have to do that now too. But it's just kind of amazing to see how the scene has developed, even in the last 20 years. How things have really globalized, and you're seeing not only global audiences, but a lot of performers from all over the world as well. So this is just a really wonderful time to be here to kind of connect with the international scene of Carnatic music and dance.
So you've been coming here every season since '99? Almost
continuously. There was a short break when I was in college, because as you were mentioning, December is a holiday, but there's also final exams and things like that before the holidays. So there was a phase where when I was in college, when I was in high school, exams would end at a certain time. When I was in college, they would end at a different time. So, when I was in grad school, it ended at a different time. So every phase of life, there was kind of a different December schedule. But for the most part, I came, almost every year.
So like you said, you've been exposed to different kinds of music and instruments. But why Mridangam? Why did you choose Mridangam?
Yeah, I mean, again, part of it, of course, is my sort of love and passion for the instrument itself, for the sound. But in many ways, I feel like the instrument also chose me, right? As an 8-year-old, my dad happened to have an instrument at home, and he was learning for just a few months. He was just it was a lifelong passion of his. So it was there. So the instrument was there. I was listening to recordings and things like that. But yeah, it was something, of course, about the sound. But again, in many ways, it also kind of chose me, and you have a relationship with your instruments, over the course of time. By high school, I also started learning piano and drum set, and sort of jazz and music theory stuff that goes with that, and then more seriously continued that in college onwards. So I also play within Carnatic percussion. The mridangam is my main instrument. I've also studied ganjira and garam, and also the morsing. So kind of to explore the full sort of arsenal of Carnatic percussion. Then of course I also play the drum set, and I have something called a hybrid kit where we kind of bring all of these elements together. So the drum set plus Carnatic percussion all in one setup.
Oh yeah, that's your that's I read about it in your project.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of a way of integrating all these different elements into one sort of set of percussion.
So when you're doing a fusion or a collaboration, how do you think you make the mridangam's essence stay there?
Yeah, I think with any kind of collaboration, the most important thing is to really study the traditions as they are before you start sort of combining them in new ways, right? So every tradition has its own history, its own culture, the people, the community, the values. The more you know about that, then you start sort of like the overlap between the traditions becomes more obvious. So you don't have to necessarily force the collaborations. You actually see the points of intersection actually right before you. But to do that, you have to really study the traditions and get to know the people, as much as possible. And the other thing is rhythm is actually, it's a universal. It's actually the only universal. We often talk about like music as like a universal language, but we know that's not really true, right? I mean, music has so many boundaries with language and instruments, tuning systems, everything is different. But every kind of music has rhythm. That's like a universal factor. So for me, even though the mridangam was my first musical language, I realized that there was something even deeper than that was connecting all of these traditions, and that's just rhythm, that's pure rhythm. And so then I started exploring different ways of expressing rhythm through other instruments, through combining different instruments, and I was always, every kind of music I'd listen to, I was always drawn to the rhythm, to the beats, to the sort of underlying things in the music. So I always kind of saw that there was something universal in rhythm, and there's just different ways of expressing it.
Okay, so when you guys rehearse, you set up a kind of a music, but when you perform, you improvise there.
Sure.
You have a dialogue between, and how does it work?
I mean, I can give you one example. So I have an Indo-jazz funk crossover group. It's called the Alo Project. We actually just celebrated our 50th performance as a band. We launched in 2019, and we kind of endured through the pandemic, and we here basically about 50 performances out. So we had a wonderful sort of celebration at SF Jazz last month, which is a fantastic venue in San Francisco. And so the group, at the core, we're a trio. There's myself on Indian percussion and drum set, Prashant Radhakrishnan is a sax player, who's also studied Carnatic music and jazz very seriously. He's also been coming here for the season probably since '99. And Colin Hogan is a wonderful pianist and accordion player. So in that kind of setting, we have pieces that a lot of original music that we've written, but there's a lot of improvisation, like you're saying. So improvisation is all about it's like a conversation, right? Like, I mean, right now we're improvising, right? So in the same way, when you bring musicians together, you're having a dialogue, and again, the more you know about the people, the musicians, where they're coming from, like, you can have a more organic kind of conversation. So with Prashant and Colin, for example, I've been playing with Prashant for, I think, 25 years, like basically. We started playing as kids. So we've had this sort of like personal development, along with the musical development. So that informs like how we improvise, how we play with each other. But every, improvisation is spontaneous, and every time you improvise, it's new. There's something new and unplanned. So even here, in the season, I think every concert I'm playing with different musicians. Right, so it's not like a set group that I'm playing, 7 shows with, but I'm playing with different people, and some of these musicians I actually only perform with when I come here to the season. But I think, as you, the more you play and the more you interact with artists, like even that improvisation and dialogue evolves, right? So the way I was playing, say, 20 years ago may not be the way I'm playing now. Hopefully saying, more interesting or more mature things and interacting in a more more nuanced and sort of intricate way.
And dance, they call it manodharma.
Manodharma.
What happens in it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's beautiful, and it just happens. It's magical.
A lot of it's magical. A lot of it's actually, even just today, I was looking at some clips. My concert opener was just a few days ago that you guys attended at Bharati Vidya Bhavan with Laguri, Chijaya Krishnan, Vijay Lakshmi, and KV Gopalakrishnan. And I was just watching a clip that someone recorded. And it was just this really magical moment in a piece that we've all played the piece, many times, but there's just like a moment in the piece where suddenly it just goes into this excursion of improvisation, and it's just the magic of the moment, and it's just wonderful to watch that, when you're playing it, it's one experience, but then to look back at it is another. So
you have collaborated with a lot of wonderful artists. So like, who was your favorite? Is there a particular concert you want to talk about?
Oh, that's a hard question to answer. But every experience is different. I mean, for me, every concert is like a magical experience. I've never felt like a concert to be like a run-of-the-mill, just kind of go through the motions thing. Like there's always like there's a certain preparation, and you're not necessarily playing at home. You're traveling and playing. So there's all this kind of like suspense before every show. There's always some butterflies, before every performance, and I think that's really important. Like if there ever gets to a point where like it just feels run of the mill, like you're just going through the motions, like you'll never have those magical moments of improvisation and dialogue. So I view every experience, even playing. I mentioned we did about 50 shows with my band. Mm-hmm. Every show is different. Every show is different. The energy is different. We're all coming in from different places, different mindsets, right? So even though it may be the same music, in mm-hmm. quotes, but the improvisation, the energy, the feel, the flow is always new, and to me, like that's the most exciting thing about, especially Carnatic music and improvisational music in general. Like it's truly in the moment. You have to be there every second of the way.
Tell us more about the Alo Project.
So we launched in 2019. Mm-hmm. Actually, it's funny. Our very first show was in 2017. The first time we played as the Alo Project, and it was for a performance that was part of the 50th anniversary of the Beatles album, the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club. It was the 50th year of that album. There was a huge tribute concert in Berkeley, in California, and they invited me to do a cover. We're basically covering songs in the album, the Sgt. Pepper's album, and they asked me to do a cover of a piece called "Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite," which is this really kind of quirky tune at the end of the album. And so I immediately hit up Prashant and Colin, my friends, and I said, "Hey, let's see what we can do with this piece." So that was the first time that we came, together. On that, I was playing mridangam, ganjira. There was a saxophone and accordion. Okay. So it was a really sort of unique arrangement. And we take the original tune, and then go into this completely Carnatic improvisational section in the middle, and then come back to the tune at the end. So yeah, that's actually how we first launched as the Alo Project. But then, we were sort of thinking about. And especially myself and Prashant have been thinking about like the intersections of Carnatic music and jazz and funk and pop for many, many, many years. And then we kind of sat and really developed some original content, original music, and then started performing very actively in 2019 through like the World Music and Global Music Festival circuit, jazz festival circuit in the Bay Area in California. And then we started. We had our East Coast premiere earlier this year. In New York City. We're at Joe's Pub, which is a wonderful venue in the Strathmore in DC. We have a Southern tour coming up next month. Southern meaning in the United States, okay. The south of the United States, and a potential Midwest tour, also in the United States next year. So again, things just kind of organically grew over many, many years. So there was never a day where I woke up and said, I need an Indo jazz funk group. It never started like that. It was years and years and years in the making. Okay. And organically sort of developed, and I think it's very lucky that we're all sort of in the same area, in California at the same time, and able to kind of create. And we have another wonderful artist, Rupa Mahadevan, who's a singer, Carnatic singer and crossover artist, who's also coming here to Chennai, in a few weeks, I believe. So she also has sung with us on many, many concerts. So she's also very much part of this Carnatic diaspora family, who's very seriously studied Carnatic music and crossing genres.
So the Alo performance, you haven't performed in India?
We have not performed in India so far, okay. So that's definitely on the radar. And there was some talk of that in late 2019, and then of course the pandemic hit. So we haven't actually been able to do that yet, but that's definitely on the radar.
Can we expect it anytime soon?
I would. It's absolutely a dream to bring that, because there's of course a lot of collaboration happening in India with artists in India, and other parts of the world. But I think what we're doing is a completely new sound, and also just something that was very much like inspired by our studies and time here in India, and in the Carnatic scene here, and studying, jazz and funk and stuff and growing up in America. So it's very much it's a very cross-cultural kind of exploration.
Do you think it's also bringing people together, about like your audiences together?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, most of our audiences in the US are not typical Carnatic audiences. We're mostly performing for non-Indian people who may have no background in Indian music. We're playing at mainstream venues that have typically never featured Carnatic music. We're the first Carnatic music inspired act at most of the venues we've played at. It's really wonderful to be able to bring this kind of sound, this collaboration and to bring people together. Ultimately, like a performance at a venue it's like a community space, right? It's a place to bring people together, and especially to bring diverse people together. That's like the dream, right? To bring people who have maybe never interacted with each other, but they're coming together for this experience and hopefully meeting each other and building relationships.
Tell us more about your connect with Margari and Mylapore.
Yeah, sure. So again, it's a very strong connection that I guess formally started in '99, and I've been coming here since then. Often it was my dad. He was also on holiday basically in December, so he would come with me as a kid, and we often actually used to stay just down the street here at a hotel. Okay. So we right next to the tank. So we know the area so well. I mean, when I walk down these streets, like it really is like a flashback even for me, as a kid, growing up and coming here every year. And of course, my teacher, Guru sir, is also. I mean, this area is, for me, has sort of been defined by him, and his work and his presence, presence here. So yeah, I mean, growing up, I used to, of course, come here and perform. I used to go to a lot of concerts, by my teacher. Actually, in most of the shows, I used to sit with my teacher on stage, and take his instrument and kind of sit with him. And I feel very lucky where I think I was like coming here right at that time when a lot of the past sort of masters and legends were still performing, but like kind of maybe the last phase of their career. So I got to see, my teacher performing with so many legends, some who are not even around today, right? So that was a really great, experience. And it's, like I said, it's just really amazing to see how the scene has grown, even in the last 20 years. Of course, if you go back, it's probably evolved in so many ways, right? But even from my perspective, not being 100 years old, I've seen so much change and development and globalization and of course I think with technology and media, social media, everything, it's developed in a lot of new ways. So it's really exciting for me to see also what the contemporary generation is doing here in India. I feel like a lot of there's a lot more connection and contact now than ever before, right? So I mean, I'm always in touch with so many friends and colleagues here in Chennai now, right? So I mean, throughout the year, not just the season, but throughout the year. And a lot of times when artists from here come to the US, I tour with them there, so there's these constant connections, being made. And it's always a fun experience, when some of these artists, my friends come to say California, like I take them around town and, we hang out in the places that I hang out with my friends. So it's in some ways like the world has really shrunk and the scene has really just become a lot tighter. So
what are you looking forward to this season?
Yeah, of course, my concerts, spending time, with my teacher, with friends, colleagues, family, the food, of course. I mean, the scene here, it's always, a big part of the attraction. And and just, kind of also kind of seeing what kind of organic collaborations come up, right? So one of the very unique things about this season, I often describe it to some of my colleagues and like people who don't have a background in Carnatic music, like in the US, non-Indian collaborators. Like this is almost like a conference, right? And it's funny, I think back in the day they used to call it like a musical conference, right? Mm-hmm. So in a sense, it's like you have people coming from all over the world presenting their music, their craft. But a big part of any conference is the networking, right? You meet people from all these different places, all kind of congregated in one space. So I think there's a lot of like organic collaboration that can happen that way.
So we also have lecture demonstrations and other things. Yeah. You collaborate, you get to ask questions.
You get to ask questions, but even in a more basic organic way, like you just run into people, right? True. I mean, I was actually at a cafe yesterday meeting a friend of mine, who's based here, and a very famous musician just happened to walk in, and then we suddenly were talking with him, and like so things like that happen, in this kind of setting. So it's really exciting to sort of see like, then we started talking, and then the conversation goes in a completely different direction, and so that kind of thing is really sort of exciting.
Yeah. So we wanted to ask you a few quick questions about Mylapore.
Okay.
So, what's your favorite food spot?
Oh, well, that's actually also really complicated. I mean, because I think there's so many spots now. I kind of grew up eating at Basanta Bhavan when I used to come here because that was here for a long time. Kapagambal Mess, all these places, of course, are awesome. Of course, the Sabha canteens are also, you can't go wrong. But of course, every year it's like a different, caterer and stuff. So we're eagerly waiting for that to start up, I guess, next week. But I think all the spots around the tank, like you can't really go wrong. And actually, I did sort of like a pseudo coffee tour of the tank. Like actually, the first day I landed, like I wanted to just stay up all day and like beat the jet lag. So I went with my uncle. We walked all around the tank, and there's just so many coffee stalls now, right? Like way more than even like 5 years ago, I feel like. So there was just incredible coffee spots and the rose milk stall, and like we kind of did the whole thing. So it's really I describe the Milapur tank as it's like a cultural icon, right? Okay. It's such a unique sort of like it exemplifies like this so much of the spirit of the season.
So what would your ideal day in Milapur be like?
The ideal day? Yeah, I mean, it's sort of defined by music, right? So you start the day with like the bhajana, sampradayam, like going around the tank. Of course, the temple, the Kapaleshwar temple is an incredible, cultural landmark and religious landmark. So, going there, going to a concert. Of course, I like to have some practice in my day as well. So actually setting some time in the morning and practicing. Going to my teacher's house. He lives actually literally just a couple of streets down from here. That's, always been a really, inspiring setting for me, because it's very much like he's preserved that kind of like lifestyle and energy from the past, in a way that's like, you don't find that in so many other places. So that's always wonderful. And eating at any of the wonderful spaces around here. And then kind of concert hopping during the day.
If you could tell us some memory based in Milapur, like from your childhood or something you recall.
Well, I mean, pretty much all the stuff that I just said, like I remember doing these things since I was like 9 or 10, right? And and back then, like I mean, it was all kind of new, and like I think this is like a very unique setting, even in India, let alone in a global context. But I think even for people outside of say Chennai or outside of this area, like there's probably nothing quite like this anywhere else, right? So I remember coming here when I was 9, 10 onwards. Back then it was a little bit more grueling. I would add to that routine, like in the morning I would do my homework. So I'd take all my homework from school and I'd do it in the morning, so the rest of the day is kind of open. But yeah, we used to kind of make this the round around the tank, and eating at the spots, going to my teacher's place, practicing, performing. So it's a very like unique experience. Again, I feel very fortunate to have had those experiences since childhood, even though I was actually growing up in the United States. But every year, at least for 1 or 2 months, I'd be spending time here and getting those experiences. And I realize now that even a lot of people, even here in Chennai, may not have had those experiences.
True.
So again, I have to thank my family and my teachers for creating that environment that allowed me to even sort of enjoy this experience.
Today's younger generation stepping into music and all of that, do you think it's going to be the same like Carnatic music and Margari as a whole? Do you think it's going to have the same essence and the same thing that the originality is going to be? Yeah, it's a really good question, and I'm definitely not a fortune teller, so I can't tell you for sure. But things have been and will continue to change and evolve in different ways. Like I said, even in the 25 years that I've been coming here, it's changed so much. I mean, the world has changed, right? I mean, with technology, with everything, we're just like so much more connected. You now have like a group of artists like myself based in America as full-time Carnatic musicians, right? I mean, 10 years ago, this was almost like unheard of, right? So now you have a group, like myself, Prashant, the sax player, Rupa is a singer, Arun Ramurthy, a violinist. So there's a group of us. Kamalakiran Minjamuri is a violinist, who's playing here, virtually every day. So the scene has developed, it's changed, and so it's only going to continue, changing and developing. But I think the point is like we have to embrace the change, right? So trying to recreate or preserve something from the past is basically impossible. I mean, we can take the essence of it and we can try to understand like what were the positives of that thing. But the Music Academy conference from 100 years ago can't be recreated today, right? It's a totally new context. The world has changed. So I think it's for us as artists, and as people to like figure out, well, what were the good things in the past? Like what was the essence that was there? Has any of that been lost? Can we bring that back? But how can we also
sort of like transform what we're doing for a modern global audience. And I think a big part also of what we need to do is as musicians in any genre, but especially something like Carnatic music, we have to build new audiences, right? So every kind of scene genre has its own audience, but unless you have new people coming in and new younger folks coming in and appreciating it, the art form is very fragile, right? Like it's not a given that in 5 years anything is going to be around, right? So it's up to us to sort of like collectively, like artists, institutions, media, everyone to sort of come together and see how we can like sustain what we're doing and bring in new audiences and at this point from all over the world, not even just in India, but it's a global art form.
Do you face criticisms for collaborating with other genre and such things like that?
I personally haven't like faced any kind of like criticism because collaboration, like almost everything that we do these days is collaboration of some kind or another, right? So, and collaboration has been happening in Indian music and Carnatic music for like centuries, right? It's not new. I mean, I always tell people like the violin is a core part of Carnatic music, but where did the violin come from, right? So that was itself cross-cultural collaboration, whatever, 300 years ago, right? And it just happened back then. In the past, like collaboration, cross-cultural exchange, it took a lot longer, right? Because things moved a lot slower because of transportation, communication. Like it took decades and decades, generations to have this collaboration. Nowadays, things can happen a lot faster. But the collaboration has been part and parcel of like Carnatic music right from the beginning. So and nowadays you see a lot of collaboration with artists, like with film, the film industry, and with concert artists and dance artists. Like there were all these boundaries that were put up in the past, right? I think a lot of those luckily are breaking down. Maybe some people are trying to put the barriers back up, but I think a lot of young artists, from my experience, are very open to just collaborating with good people, but there's good people and good artistry everywhere. And of course, Hindustani, Carnatic collaboration, Jugalbandis, that's become, mainstream, I would say, that happens almost throughout the year in different parts of the world now. And collaborations with artists, in American, Western music genres has become very common. So I think there's a lot more openness to that. But of course, there's still a lot more things that we have to all sort of evolve and as a community, like sort of understand like what are the where are the areas that we can grow, as a scene and as a community.
So this kind of music, like people say that mostly Carnatic music is strongly connected with devotion. So would you connect music to devotion or as art?
Yeah, these are all really complex questions. I mean, I don't have a simple answer to any of it yet. I think I'm still thinking about it myself, honestly. It's great that people are talking a lot more about it and there's more dialogue. My perspective, of course, is like, it's a very individual experience, right? Everyone experiences and appreciates things in their own way, and I'm all about letting people enjoy it the way they want to enjoy it. If someone has like a religious epiphany going to a concert, great. I mean, go for it. That's wonderful. If someone comes there just as a evening out, so like entertainment, and they're going for dinner, fine. Like that's like, enjoy it the way you want to enjoy it. So I'm sort of open to everyone's experiences, but it's a very complicated thing, and I think allowing people the freedom to engage with the art form is the most important thing. I don't think anyone has the power to say it needs to be this, it shouldn't be that, you have to do it this way, not that way. Because these are all, at the end of the day, like art forms and traditions way bigger than any individual, right? These have been created by communities, thousands, tens of thousands of people over centuries. So we're just like one little dot trying to engage with the tradition at this point in time in the best way that we can possible. But even all of us in this room are going to have a different experience and engagement with the same art form. So, and I think that's cool. That's the beautiful part. It's interpretive, right?
So just like how Margari is celebrated in India and like it's like known all over.
Yeah.
Do you think it could be celebrated in other countries as well, or there could be more seasons like Margari? And like since you're living in the US and all of that, what would be the Margari of the US?
I think there have definitely been efforts to kind of like recreate the essence of this festival in the U.S. I mean, there's actually, I mean, even in California, in the Bay Area, they call it, I think, the Bay Area Margari Festival. There's like a parallel thing kind of happening there, not for the whole month, but like for maybe a week or something. It's happening, I think, in different parts of the U.S. So, yeah, I think you definitely can, but again, I think the key is to like adapt it to that context, right? So trying to like bring the Mylapore tank to any other part of the world may not be possible. In the same way, it's like trying to bring like the Golden Gate Bridge to the Mylapore tank, like it's not really going to work, right? But there's like an essence of the festival and like the community, because a lot of artists from here are going to, you know, say the US and performing in festivals, and there are artists from the US coming here and performing in festivals. So that like energy and the artistry can be there, but you know, how you want to recreate like the rest of it is like, yeah, I mean, you can, people are trying, but I think you have to think very carefully, like who are you trying to reach by doing this, right? Like who is the audience for creating a Margari festival in Detroit, Michigan, or something like that. So every festival, like I think we all actually as a community need to think very seriously, like who is the audience for these art forms? Again, how can we build audiences, grow audiences? Because none of that can be taken for granted anymore. I always say as like a performer, like I respect like each and every second that an audience member is there, right? Because nowadays, like people could be doing literally a million other things other than coming to your concert and sitting there for whatever, 2 hours, right? Like they could be on their phone anywhere doing anything, but they've chosen to come there, give you their time, their energy, their engagement. So we have to respect that, you know, as artists and as institutions, right? So, but we have to think like what are we doing? How are we presenting it? Who is it reaching? Are there other people that we're trying to reach? If so, how do we reach them? And I mean, of course, everyone's working on this in different ways, and there's no one simple answer to any of it. But I think it's really important to think about that in all contexts. You know, like even for the project, like the Alo Project that I'm, you know, presenting, we actually sometimes perform Carnatic pieces in our concerts, but we're playing in a completely new space in mainstream venues for very diverse audiences, mostly non-Indian audiences. But we're trying to bring the spirit of Carnatic music and our training and the tradition to those new audiences. So the way we do that is not necessarily just playing a 4-hour Carnatic concert, right? You're doing that in a different, you're presenting it differently, you're speaking about it differently and stuff like that. So I think we all have to think like a lot about how we're reaching our audiences. And then of course the whole social media thing, that's like a separate, that's like another like hour-long conversation. But that is reaching new audiences and building new audiences. And a lot of artists have been doing that, you know, very successfully in their own ways. But I think we're still trying to figure it all out, right? There's a lot of artists who are doing either or, but now a lot of us are trying to figure out how to do both, right? Like it's not just about live performance or just about social media. Like how can you bridge these two in an authentic way, right? And how can you build new audiences in an authentic way? I think most people are thinking very seriously about these things and trying are working on a lot of like creative efforts. So that's good. I don't see. I think everyone is trying to evolve in innovative ways.